Hello, and thank you for joining me. This is Professor Gindelsberger, and we're going to work through a close reading of a complex text, that poem that you've been reading through in this module of your online course. So I want to thank you for being here, and let's work through this together. First, let's talk about reading and why we're talking about close reading. There are a lot of reasons, and one of them is that reading has changed. So long gone are the days when we only have the ability to read by flipping pages in a book that's in our hands. And a lot of the research about reading is telling us that when we read online, as you will have to do so much of in an online course, the reading is done less deeply. So because so many different types of texts have been optimized for screen reading, we tend to read in more bite-sized pieces. We read text messages, we read tweets and Instagram posts and snaps, and all of these texts are able to be comprehended within seconds. So when you encounter a text online that requires you to pay attention for longer than 10 seconds, often that becomes a point of frustration. So we need a strategy that will allow us, both in print, but especially online, considering this is an online course, we need a strategy that will allow us to really dig into a text that requires more than just 10 seconds to comprehend. Now, especially when you have a complex text and then a task associated with that, as of course you will so often encounter in your college education, that just increases the difficulty of that reading situation and makes close reading an even more effective strategy. So the task associated with this poem is on screen here in this blue starburst. Citing evidence from the text, write a paragraph that explains the tone of this poem and how the poet's use of figurative language contributes to this tone. Now, as if the poem weren't difficult enough, that task, might have your head spinning, and you might be thinking, what? And so we're going to break this down and take this poem through a close read together. So, close reading is a simple process. It's very powerful, but it's simple. And as you saw on the previous page of this module, it's 3 steps. Step 1 is read it to get it. So in step 1 of the close read process, you are reading this text one time through and just answering the question, what is this text mainly about? In step 1, you're going to skip over vocabulary words that you don't know. In step 1, you're going to push past complex and complicated sentences that might be confusing you. And in step 1, your whole purpose is just to be able to answer the question, what is this about? Once you've done that, it kind of activates all of the prior knowledge you've acquired about that topic, and your brain kind of wakes up and becomes more prepared. If you think of your brain as a file cabinet, you might have learned some stuff a long time ago that's still up there, but it's filed way in the back. Well, when we activate prior knowledge, that stuff filed away in the back kind of comes to the front, and it allows us to access and make better sense of the information we're reading. So in step 1, once you get it, once you identify what is this about, it helps you in step 2 read that text again so that you better understand the structure and the features of the text. Okay, so yes, you're going to read that same text again. And that is a piece of this multiple read, close reading process. So in step 2, we read it again, essentially to get it better. And so now that we know the topic, we're going to go back to step 2 and look at the author's craft, right? How did the author choose to organize the information in this text? What devices or strategies did the author use and choose to use to get his or her message across? Because if an author is published, very typically, the choices made while writing, after all of the revisions, are done with intent. Okay, so in step 2, we're reading that text again to figure out, okay, what strategies did the author use and why did he use them or she use them to help you make meaning out of this text? So after we've done step 1, right? Step 1 is done, we've read it, we get it. Step 2 is done, we read it again, and we get it better. In step 3, we're going to return to that same text one more time so that we can analyze it for the specific information we need to complete a task. Step 3, for our purposes, is always going to be about completing a task, right? So in step 1, you read it, you get it. You know the topic. In step 2, you read it and you get it better. You understand why the author presented the information in this way, and that helps you in step 3 to go back and just very specifically look at the things you need to look at so that you can complete a task. So we're going to take a look at Olive Senior's poem, Plants Together, the same poem that you've seen in the previous pages in the module. And we're going to work through these 3 steps of the close read process. So I'm just going to kind of think out loud, and that is actually a strategy called a think aloud, to kind of help you get an idea of the thoughts I'm processing as I go through each stage of this close read process. So remember, step 1 is just read it to get it. So typically I would, of course, just read this silently, but for the purpose of this modeling session, I'm going to read it out loud, and what I'm going to do in order to make sense of it is to look for key words and key phrases that help me get it. Now, when I say key words and phrases, I'm not looking for things like of, the, and, my, his, her, it. These are words that are in all texts about all things. But in this step of the close read process, as I really look to just identify the topic or the central idea, I'm going to look for keywords that maybe keep repeating themselves, or phrases that are very powerful and speak to me that seem to be really important to the central theme of the text. So let's go through this first read of the text. Again, I'll read out loud and just kind of take you through my thoughts. Plants. So there's a clue as to what this is about, right? But there's got to be more than that. Plants are deceptive. You see them there, looking as if once rooted they know their places. Not like animals, like us, always running around, leaving traces. Yet from the way they breed, excuse me, and twine, from their exhibitionist and rather prolific nature, we must infer a sinister, not to say imperialistic, grand design. Perhaps you've regarded as beneath your notice armies of mangrove on the march, roots in the air, clinging tendrils anchoring themselves everywhere. The world is full of shoots bent on conquest, invasive seedlings seeking wide open spaces, material gathered for explosive dispersal in capsules and seed cases. Maybe you haven't taken in the colonizing ambitions of hitchhiking burrs on your sweater, surf-riding nuts bobbing on ocean, parachuting seeds and other airborne traffic dropping in. And what about those special agents called flowers? Dressed, perfumed, and made up for romancing insects, bats, birds, bees, even you. Don't deny it, my dear. I've seen you sniff and exclaim, "Believe me, innocent, that sweet fruit, that berry, is nothing more than ovary, the instrument to seduce you into scattering plant progeny. Part of a vast cosmic program that, once set in motion, cannot be undone, though we become plant food and earth wind down. They'll outlast us. They were always there. One step ahead of us. Plants gone to seed, generating the original profligate, extravagant, reckless, improvident weed." Okay, so poetry can be hard to read, so I do suggest reading it out loud. And when you're reading poetry, sometimes it helps to pretend that it's prose, right? And try to read in helpful chunks. So each verse is not really always a complete sentence. So if you get stuck in reading to the rhythm of this being one complete thought, and then this being another complete thought, and then this, it can really kind of break up the meaning of the overall text. So try to read poetry almost as if it were prose sometimes, and that can help you make better meaning out of it. So what I've done in this first read, I knew first it was about plants. Okay, so of course the title is always a key to what is this mostly about, which is our goal in step 1, right? But it is a poem, so poems are rarely just straightforward, here's what this is about, type texts. But we do know it's about plants. So in the very first verse here, plants are deceptive. That had me thinking, what? Plants are deceptive. So instantly there's kind of like a negative presentation of plants here. Like, okay, how do you feel, readers, about people who are deceptive? It's putting you kind of on the defensive here, right? They're imperialistic, like the colonists who went out and took over the lands. They are bent on conquest, like those same colonists. Colonizing ambitions, we have that reference again here. Special agents called flowers, oh, they're going to seduce us. These things can't be undone. And we become plant food. They'll outlast us. They're one step ahead of us. Whoa! So, after my first read, I think to myself, what is this about? And your goal is just to generate a statement of what the text is about. So think for a minute. This poem is about, and then come up with a one-sentence summary. My sentence is this poem is about how people underestimate the potential of plants to take control. So we're very clearly told in this poem that the plants are capable of taking over. So that's step 1. Step 1 is done. We've read it. We get it. Now let's move on to step 2.